Hello folks, back again, out here on the Political Viking channel or the Rick Wagner Show channel, depends on where you're coming at it from. We're on YouTube here, which may be where you're seeing it. But I wanted to get back with you. We haven't had as much activity as I would like, but we're going to try and be a little better about that. This week I wanted to follow up with our little discussion we had last time about the Peacock generals out there that we have on our military now. The ones that are all fuss and feathers but don't seem to be all that great at doing their main job, which is winning wars, leading their men, and minimizing casualties while being victorious. Seems to be kind of a, well, it's an afterthought, really, with some of these guys, it seems to be. And something came up this week that made me think about it, and that was we had an operation at 29 Palms, which is the Desert Warfare School for the Marine Corps. It was a joint operation between the United States Marines and some of our allies in the Middle East and Europe, including the majority of which came from Britain, Her Majesty's Royal Marine Commando, and then some folks from the United Arab Republic and a couple of other smaller detachments. But they were going through a desert warfare simulation out at 29 Palms in the desert, and if news reports are to be believed, there was a numerically superior force of the Marines, but we don't know exactly what those numbers were. But during the time this operation lasted, and it was called Operation Green Dagger, and you can look up on the internet if you're interested in it, I first saw it in the British papers because they were quite excited about it, because it appeared that the British had easily decimated our own forces in the desert during this training, and that halfway through the training scenario, the Marine Corps had asked for a reset because the technical kills, that were not actually anybody injured, but technically killed in action because of the activities of the other side, had pretty much wiped out our forces. And it was very sad. The British papers thought this was great. They were all over it. It started showing up in our own newspapers shortly thereafter. And then Senator Josh Hawley, which is someone who impresses me more every time I see him in the United States Congress, said essentially that, and I might paraphrase a bit here, that our leadership in the military better start getting back to learning how to win wars and not be so concerned about things like white fragility and so forth. Probably good advice. We talked a little bit about that before. And I was very disappointed when I read this, and I did some more investigation into it. To see our Marines, which I can tell you are a tremendous fighting force. All of our fighting forces are extremely competent, but the Marines really have the esprit de corps that makes something like this really kind of not just surprising, but shocking. And so when you look into it, what you see is, and I submit this, that it is a failure of leadership. We have relied too much on gadgetry and opposed to tactical superiority and leadership positions. Apparently what happened was that the British forces, the Marine Commandos, had been wanting to try out some new equipment that they had that had to do with locating and neutralizing command and control centers. But what they had decided was that rather than meeting the enemy, in this case the enemy forces would have been composed of our military men and women, directly and engaging them out in the field, that they would penetrate the screen of soldiers, well, actually Marines, and attack instead the command and control centers for the enemy, which would have been us in the situation. And they were successful. What they were able to do was, with a relatively small amount of men, according to the published reports, they were able to capture the command and control headquarters and neutralize that, which left our troops in the field essentially leaderless. They were not able to communicate with one another. They were not able to communicate with the command centers. And because of our over-reliance, apparently, on these sort of technical and wonky systems, that once they were down, we did not have a way to effectively control our troops in the field. That is, once again, it's a failure of tactical leadership. Some may dispute that, and that's fine. But what we've done is, it seems to be that above a certain rank in our military, people have become more political than they have military minded. and it's starting to show up. We're not thinking ahead tactically. We're very impressed with procurement, as we know that almost all of the four-star generals seem to be obsessed with the idea of being on the right side of things and being woke and all this kind of stuff because they're interested in getting jobs, very high-paying jobs, with military contractors when they get out. I mean, our Secretary of Defense was, a worker for Raytheon before he was yanked back out of his plush private job and back into the Secretary of Defense role. This is sort of apparently the dream, if you talk to people in Washington, of a lot of these military leaders. And the way they get those jobs is by appearing to be very, very on the side of whatever political party is in power and whatever philosophy seems to be carrying the day, and certainly whatever philosophy is being touted in these corporations. So the focus drifts off from military superiority, and it becomes less and less important that you are successful militarily and more important that you say and do the right things. And procurement is an extremely lucrative type of endeavor. If you can rope somebody in who knows the ins and outs of the Pentagon procurement system onto your board, and you are at General Dynamics or Raytheon or any other places, I mean, that could be an enormous help. I mean, we'd all see how that would work. The contracts are enormous. They have a lot of fluff built into them sometimes, let's say. And everybody is very interested in getting them. And so if you offer your services out there as, I know my way around the Pentagon, I still have contacts there, I'm able to, navigate this, some of that certainly is perfectly all right. But when it becomes the focus of the time spent for our military leaders, things begin to fall apart. This kind of things like this Operation Green Dagger, I believe, are sort of canaries in our coal mine. Not only do we have leadership that isn't tactically minded in the field, but we have leadership that is fascinated with gadgetry. And gadgetry is all fine and good, as we all know. We all have them. I have a cell phone in front of me here. I mean, we're talking on YouTube. We're very involved in gadgetry. But what happens is that you begin to substitute those sorts of things for traditional military virtues, which is, alternative means of communication, teaching units to be more independent in the field. If they lose contact with their superiors, this is what you can do. This is what you're authorized to do. This is how you figure out what's going on. It seems to me when you speak with people and do some research into this, those sort of qualities are disappearing. And we've replaced a lot of it with this ability to have a voice in your helmet, sort of, that everybody's a communication. It's all you go here, you go there, you do this, you do that. And then when that drops off, we haven't provided enough guidance for our field commanders, people who have their feet on the ground out there, our captains and majors particularly. They don't have enough freedom of action. They don't have enough backup planning provided to them. And it showed itself in this operation, it seems like. You should do some research and make your own conclusions. This is simply mine. But it's troubling, and it needs to be addressed because we have the finest military in the world with the best equipment, wonderful men, free men fighting for a free country that's traditionally been the winners in these wars. But if you don't take care of them, if you allow the head of the fish to become rotten, it starts spreading down. And after a while, if it doesn't appear to be important for the people at the top to care about certain things, then pretty soon the people in the middle start feeling like that. And it works its way down. And as people who have sons, daughters, friends, whomever in the military, many of whom are going to be the recipients of either the good planning, bad planning, or whatever the case may be, it's in all of our interest to make sure this is addressed. So I just bring that to your attention. I give you my thoughts on it, but please take some time. And after our last conversation about the Peacock generals a bit, I did find my photograph here of William Tecumseh Sherman. Now, William Tecumseh Sherman may not be your favorite general if you're from the southern United States, considering his march to the sea and some of the decimation he laid on the South to try and bring the war to a close. But there's no doubt that he was a tremendous and gifted tactician, as well as a strategist. His middle name, Tecumseh, as you may know, is named after a very, very proud and successful Indian chief. That would be an American Indian chief, Native American. And you may notice his uniform here. Not a lot on it. Not a lot of bells, whistles, ribbons, medals, shiny objects. Just not. Oftentimes, Sherman and some of the other generals of the time, Grant, Sheridan, those folks, they were pretty busy to get too dressed up. Doesn't mean that you can't be someone who is a little gaudy. We all know that there's exceptions, like George S. Patton, who was quite proud of his uniforms and his awards. He had his holsters throughout his career made by a gun leather guy in El Paso, Texas, that he ran into when he was stationed down there. You may know that he was stationed in Texas during the time when Pershing, later to be General Blackjack Pershing, was down chasing Pancho Villa around in Mexico. So he continued to have his leather made by that guy because he was good at it. And, he was a very, very wealthy and influential man, unlike a lot of people in the military. His family was extremely wealthy, and I think we discussed before, his brother told him, George, you get the glory, and I'll try and make the money. And George S. Patton wanted to be a warrior his entire life. As a matter of fact, he was pretty sure that he had been a warrior his entire life, as well as a couple of lifetimes before that. But he's the exception. Most of the time, you have generals that are businesslike. You have generals like Hap Arnold, Matthew Ridgway, admirals like Nimitz, Chester Nimitz, people who took their job seriously above and beyond what was politically expedient. Now, those sorts of people don't necessarily fit very well into polite society sometimes. Warriors seldom do. They tend to be a bit brash. They tend to be a bit impatient. They tend to be a little outspoken. These are not things that get things done in political maneuvering. But if you don't have them when you're at war, I think we all know what happens. So take a look at that. Operation Green Dagger and a few other things, and follow the military. Support it. Talk with friends of yours that are in the military, or children that are in the military, or anything like that. We need to make sure that we give these brave men and women everything they can to win the war. And it isn't just equipment, and it isn't just money. It's leadership. We have to insist that the leaders in these positions realize their number one goal is to win wars, minimize casualties, and just do their job. Anyway, that's the Political Vikings point of view. You guys have a good week. We'll talk to you soon.